Hello, my sisters in Christ. I'm vlogging. This is my first ever vlog. So thank you for joining me today. I am wanting today to talk about, I'm so awkward at this, but I'm working on it. And I'm glad you're here for this experiment. I wanted to talk today about compulsory heterosexuality and my journey with that. Because if you're here watching this vlog, I imagine maybe you know a little bit about me and my music. And if you don't, what's up? I'm so glad you're here. My name's Tay. Taylor for long, but people call me Tay. I have a band called Stupid Lucky. Oh my god, sorry. I thought I would do a little bit of makeup for you guys. Is this what people do when they do vlogs? You do something while you're vlogging? So I'm gonna do that. Don't get excited. I'm not gonna do anything crazy or fancy. I'm backstage at at Six Musical because I work here sometimes. I do work in musical theater and I do work on Broadway sometimes. And then most of the time I'm doing my band. A little bit of both. So right now I'm working at Six. I'm an alternate. So they're doing the show right now. And I'm backstage in case they need me. So, okay. Anyway, let's get into it. I am a lesbian, and I love that about myself. But I haven't always identified as a lesbian. Shocker. I was socialized thinking I wasn't one, and I spent the majority of my life dating men and pursuing men. And I've always been an ally. As I reflect a lot on my time growing up and feeling at times unsafe in my home emotionally, and like I didn't have a space to be myself. And at school, like in elementary school, I remember a lot of the time coming home from school and like I would go to bed at night, and I remember laying awake in bed looking at my ceiling, going through the day, trying to figure out what I did that day that was annoying, what people didn't like, what should I do differently tomorrow so that people might like me more. That's so sad to say. As my therapist would say, oh, buddy. So yeah, that's sad. And also I'm realizing now that I'm 30, that perhaps that was like a bit of the beginning of some OCD tendencies. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Very early on, I was deeply entrenched and obsessed with this idea of being perfectly palatable for everybody, because I didn't want to feel weird and get left behind and be left out and excluded. When I was in middle school was around the time that marriage equality was on the table, and I think I was graduating high school, or was it like the middle of college when it was passed, when it became legal. And I actually came to New York City. I was in New York City that summer, and I got to be here for the first Pride after gay marriage was legalized. And at that time I was an ally, and middle school I was really starting to learn about these things, and that's when I was entering my like activism era, and joined, when I went to high school, joined GSA, joined Amnesty International, went and did like protests in Seattle. And I'm in musical theater, so I've always been around queer people. I've always been around gay people. It wasn't really until I went on tour with this show, I was on tour for about 1.5 years, that I was hanging out with a group of sapphic, non-binary queer people, like only, like exclusively, because usually my experience hanging out with and being in community with gay people and queer people was like musical theater. It was a lot of like cis het men a lot of the time. We had this really tight group on the road, and I just fell in love with all of them. Like I had crushes on some of them on the road, but nothing really serious. Nothing was acted on. But that was the first time that I was like, oh, there's a side of me I've never really given space for. And at that time, I was in a 3-year-long relationship with a man, living with him. And I had dated men since I started dating. Like, my first boyfriend was in middle school. I think I was 11, which is crazy. But that was my first boyfriend. That was my first kiss. First kiss at Bridge to Terabithia, the movie theater. And it's just interesting because I have so much trauma around my body and around sex, which I know is most of us out there. And I'm not going to get into that because I don't really feel like sharing that on the internet yet, maybe ever. But my whole life up until that point where I was on tour with these queer people was trying to make a perfect life, like trying to achieve some perfect life. And that was a big part of the recipe, was finding a partner and being chosen by a man, building a life with a man. And it wasn't until I was shown that that could look differently that I started to deconstruct that. It's also interesting because a lot of the time people talk about, you know, like your last relationship, your last hetero relationship before you were turned gay, or like what pushed you over into it. And the more I think about it, I think people ask about my last boyfriend, expecting me to describe him as like a complete monster, and like he wasn't perfect, I'm not perfect. But it was actually kind of the opposite. It was almost like I got so close to something that could be functional and like I could marry this person. I built that and I was standing in it and I was like, okay, I've pretty much achieved this and I don't want it. Like, I feel uncomfortable. There were moments where I felt scared. Like coming back home from tour, I felt not scared of him, but like scared that I had to go back into this performative world that I had escaped for like a year and a half. And I was like, oh, I'm going back to New York and I have to move back in with a man and clock back into this life. And it was like genuinely terrifying for me. I was joking about it with my friends on tour, but like I was scared of it. And I had the similar experience because, like, similarly with this journey, I've always been obsessed, I guess not anymore, but when I was in high school, I was obsessed with the idea of being a cheerleader and being in a sorority. Because in my eyes, I'm really bad at the multitasking of talking and doing my makeup. Okay, here we go. Blush. Okay, I'm gonna do some of this. I was obsessed with the idea of being a cheerleader or in a sorority because, like, I mean, I think mostly thanks to TV and film, being a cheerleader to me seemed like being a part of this really powerful posse of hot women. In retrospect, I realize probably some gay going on there, and with the sorority thing as well. And I never got to be a cheerleader, but I did my freshman year of college join a sorority. And I was so committed to being the perfect sorority girl. I wanted to achieve this image in my mind where I was obsessed with being this perfect hot girl, like the ideal hot girl, powerful sorority girl. And I was tan, my teeth were bleached, my hair was gorgeous, my tits were up, I was like on track to be president of the sorority someday. I literally was like having one-on-one meetings with the president. I was like being groomed to be the president. Like before I even rushed, I went and met like in her room. They really wanted me. They really wanted me in there. And I did it for a year and I had fun. But at the end of that year I achieved this thing. I achieved this perfect image that I thought I was supposed to be. And I sat in it and I was like, I actually don't want this. And I think I needed to get there and sit on top of my hill and feel it in order to realize that it actually wasn't what I wanted. And so I think that was a similar experience for me with dating men. And so it was just a convergence of a lot of things. I had like finally achieved like some wonderful relationship, and it just wasn't right, and I couldn't hide anymore from that. I had to reckon with all these other things that have been coming up for my whole life, honestly. Another big element of this, which I think a lot of comp het lesbians go this pipeline. I experienced the pipeline of heterosexual performing heterosexuality, using my sexuality to like feel important. Anyway, I went from heterosexuality to asexuality, which is something I avoided for a long time. I always wanted to look into asexuality, but it wasn't until like 2020, I think, that I finally was like, let me open Reddit and see what's going on in there. And I read everything, and I learned so much about myself. And I was like, I think I'm asexual because like I don't enjoy having sex. It feels bad. It feels bad in my body. I've always thought that people were pretending when they said like sex is the best thing they've ever whatever. I literally always like, people were like lying about this, right? Like people actually feel that way. I was like, oh, I'm asexual. I was asexual, identified as asexual for a few years. And let me just insert right here, right now, before anybody tries to use this to invalidate asexuality in your mind. Asexuality is real. I might not be an asexual, and learning about asexuality definitely helped my personal queer journey. And even though I'm not asexual, asexuality is very, very real. So don't get it twisted. But my learning about asexuality, deconstructing what I thought about attraction, learning about all the different kinds of attraction, sexual, romantic, intellectual, emotional, platonic, aesthetic, breaking that down. And I was like, cool, what if I remove all these things? What if I take the pressure off for sexual attraction? Because I'm not experiencing that where I'm supposed to. If I take that out of the equation, how do I relate to people now? How do I relate to men? How do I relate to the world? What am I actually attracted to? And that allowed me the space to have like a nervous system reset, because I took the pressure off to perform sexually. And I finally got to sit with my body and be like, what is it that I want? That deconstruction lasted several years. And once I removed the expectation to be sexually attracted to men, the pressure I was putting on myself to experience that, I removed that, and I was like, what am I attracted to aesthetically, romantically, emotionally, intellectually, all these other things? What am I attracted to? And I started, in this new freedom, in this new regulated state, I was realizing I was like attracted to not men that I was seeing on the internet. And that was crazy when that first started happening. I remember being like, wait a minute, that's not a boy. And that's so silly to say, but what I mean, I think, by saying that's so silly to say is like, how come that didn't come up earlier in my life? How come I didn't experience those moments when I was a kid? Those like flat out moments when I was like, dang, I'm interested, I'm attracted to this woman, this, not man. And that's why I think I go back to asexuality, because without that moment of removing sexual attraction, I never had that space, because from like early days, even like preschool, I decided to have a crush on a boy. I remember being like, I'm gonna have a crush on this boy. It's always been like, it's not like something I'm feeling, it's something that I was supposed to feel and supposed to perform. That's based on things I was watching, people around me. And so I always had this expectation placed on myself, and also from society placing on me to perform this. I suddenly removed that, and I finally had the space to let my body speak for itself. So I started being like, ooh, I'm romantically interested in this person, or oh, I'm emotionally, or I'm intellectually into this person. They were like not men. And then this is still back when I identified it as heterosexual, asexual, heteroromantic. Started dating my boyfriend in this era. I actually met him not too long after I came to terms with asexuality. And I'm putting the makeup down, you guys. It's not gonna happen. I'll maybe do it later, but I'm in the flow. Started dating him. I told him I was asexual, hoping that that would allow me space to not have so much pressure on sex in the relationship, which wasn't the reality. Nothing really changed. And then I was dealing with these same struggles that I had always dealt with in relationships with men, where I did not want to have sex. And I kept coming up against this wall, and I was like, man, is this what life is going to be like? Am I going to be in a relationship where it's like, I don't want to be touched, I don't want to have sex, and if I am doing it, I feel like I'm forcing myself and traumatizing myself every time. And, you know, my partner doesn't want that. Who wants that? Monsters want that, you know? Like, my partner doesn't want that. And so eventually, and then I booked this job and I went on this tour, and I had time away where I was just with myself, and I started seeing myself reflected in these friends, these beautiful friends who I just loved to bits and was having the time of my life with, and I had such close relationships with them. I was seeing myself in them and like the way that they related to the world. I had never seen that before in such an intimate way, and I was like, oh, that is how I feel. It just provided this safe space for me to crack open. And then we went and saw Muna. One fateful day, I think it was 2023, and they were playing Terminal 5, and I went with my friends from tour. We left, we like drove down, saw Muna, and then rejoined the tour in New York. Or we saw Muna in New York and then rejoined the tour. And I remember watching Gisette play Runner's High. And if you've seen Gisette play Runner's High live, you know what I'm talking about. The song finished and I turned around to my friends and I was like, I am gay. I'm definitely gay. And like, it was a funny moment. I think we laughed, but like I was dead serious, and I know they knew that as well. So that was okay. Back to my pipeline: heterosexuality to asexual, heteroromantic to pansexual, or asexual panromantic rather. But I was starting to be like, oh, I am experiencing sexual attraction to these women, not binary people. So what's going on there? What's up with that? I would like to do things in that regard. And then the time came to come home, and I didn't want to live with a man again. I did not want to force myself to have sex with a man. I came home. There was also some infidelity stuff that I uncovered when I got home. But that honestly wasn't the highlight of the breakup. The highlight of the breakup, like, don't get me wrong, that was a big part of it, and I don't think either of us were happy. I know neither of us were particularly happy in that relationship. Especially me being gone for 2 years, it just wasn't working. But I came off of tour. The infidelity thing came to the surface. It kind of gave me permission to step back from the relationship a bit and be like, do I want this? And I said to my friend Keaton on the phone, I remember after all this came out and I took some time to think about what I was going to do in the relationship. Would I stay with him? Would I leave? And I remember calling her and being like, I've decided to give it another chance because I don't really think I feel strongly either way, if it works out or if it doesn't, so why not stay and try? And she was like, that is so interesting, because I feel like if you felt so neutral and lukewarm about it, you would leave. Like, why would you say that? And I was like, that's interesting. And then over the next couple months, I was like going out. I went to Foot, Shed House of Yes. I was going to raves. I was going out. And I remember going out with these people. My friend was with me. We like saw them earlier in the day and then went home. My friend was like, by the way, so-and-so thinks you're hot and is like into you and wants you to come out tonight. And that was my first time hearing that there was like a lesbian person attracted to me. And I was like, my mind exploded. My mind, it was a whole new world. I felt like I was like a kid again. You know what I mean? Like in the way where all of this felt like a second puberty. I think anybody who comes out late in life will tell you that. It feels like you lose your goddamn mind, but then you find it again and it's beautiful. But it is like a second puberty and it's insane. Like flirting with them, I need to be able to explore this. That's ultimately what it came to, is I was like, I can see now that I need the space to explore this, and I don't think I can do that in the confines of a monogamous relationship with anybody. I need the space to fully give myself over to this, not have to report back to anybody, not have to share with anyone, just let this be my own journey. So ultimately, me and my ex parted ways. He moved out. Very quickly, I realized like the stark difference between my experiences performing attraction to men versus feeling fully embodied and like myself for the first time in my life. I had never felt so in tune with like my body and my desires than I did once I came out. Once I had exited that relationship and just like got the ball rolling, I was a absolute hot mess, disaster, train wreck for, I would say, probably about a year. A lot of crying, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of like acting like an absolute lunatic, dating some really wonderful people. Actually, everyone I've ever interacted with have nothing but lovely things to say about them. Probably could have treated some people better, you know, because who's perfect? I was learning, and not fully comfortable with myself yet and figuring that out. Not comfortable feeling true desire. I had been so dissociated in my life this whole time. Completely dissociated from my body, from my desire, from what I want as a human, not just in my sexual identity, but in who I am as a person. It had all been such an enmeshed mess performance for my whole life, and for the first time I had like taken a hammer to that shit and cracked it open, and stuff was starting to come out, and I was like, what am I? What is this new skin? Like, I can't even tell you how much growth I've experienced and how much work it's been to give love to all the parts of me, to my child self, to my young adult self, my early 20s self, for what I did to just survive for so long in my body. I've had to have so much forgiveness and like taken time to understand myself and not feel shame or resentment about my experience, because I was just doing my best with the information that I had and the circumstances that I was in. And I was trying so hard to be perfect because I just wanted to be loved. And I finally hit a breaking point thanks to the beautiful people around me who loved me and showed me who I was and have supported me through all of this. I finally learned to love myself, and I'm still working on it. But the way that I believe in myself now is more pure than I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm so excited about that. And I'm proud of myself for that. And that's also why I want to talk about it. That's also why I'm making like an incredibly long, unedited YouTube video about it. Because I know there are so many people like me out there. I don't know if any of this was coherent, but I hope you learned something maybe, and especially if you are either someone who is just like me, a late in life lesbian, who, you know, experienced compet for the majority of your dating life, or if you're someone who's questioning these things about yourself and trying to examine them more closely, I just hope this is helpful to hear someone talk about it. And I'm going to talk more about it. I don't know if people are going to find this video and watch the whole thing, but if you have any questions, I'd love to talk more about this. This is literally the first time I've ever sat down to make a video about it, so I think that's why all my thoughts are really disjointed and like dumpy. But I'm really proud of my journey, and I wish that my eyes would have opened earlier, but there wasn't a lot of discussion happening around me. It wasn't really available to me, and so I want to add my story to the pool of things that people might discover and start to get in touch with who they really are and what they truly want in this world. Because you deserve that. Should we finish my makeup? Do you even care? No, no one cares. But I'm gonna finish my makeup, I guess. Because I'm about to go have dinner with my beloved friends who were on tour and were there when I discovered myself, and were literally so integral to that. I'm about to go have dinner with them. Anyway, I guess that's it. It's a little bit about my story, and I'm making music about it in Stupid Lucky. Need to Know. My song Need to Know, I'll put it here, is literally the first single, and it is about this experience that I had this summer, that all of this came out of me. And we made a music video about it. I'm happy you're here. I don't know who's watching this, but I'm glad you're here. Let's talk more. All right. Love you guys.